Hi there.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. And just to
It is a pleasure.
introduce you, to the group, the viewers. Edith is a social worker, and she's specialized working with traumatized children for the last 24 years. She developed the Teddy Bear Clinic, initiated Child Witness Project in the Western Cape, and developed the Healing Project for children that have been sexually abused. She co-authored books, and she presents multiple multidisciplinary workshops on a range of child trauma related topics. And I am looking forward to get her input on the sexual education system in South Africa, and what as parents, where do we merge the parent responsibility with the school responsibility? So Edith, thank you for your time. There is so much discussion about sex education for children. Can you maybe just tell our viewers or listeners, when do we start this conversation with our children? What do we say? What is the school's responsibility? What is a parent's responsibility? I think we all in need of the correct information.
So thank you for the opportunity to talk about this really important topic. And, you know, I get asked so many questions around these issues. I think what is important is that we as parents and caregivers of other children need to be thoughtful that just as much as one day when my child grows up, I want them to be able to read and write, to be able to have happy relationships, to, you know, be able to be successful. In a similar way, we need to start thinking about what do I as a parent need to think about in terms of my child's sexual health as an adult, and what does that mean in terms of the education that I need to be giving my children now. We generally tend to feel really uncomfortable to think about children as in any way sexual beings or having any kind of sexy feelings or thoughts, you know, because it makes us uncomfortable. And so we just don't deal with it. The reality is that children's bobs and bits, I'm not sure how rude I'm allowed to be on this, but I'm sure I'm allowed to say penises and vaginas. But, you know, they're all in good working order by the time children are born. They have the same kind of physical sensations that adults do. So, you know, we are having a situation where children are having experiences, but nobody's talking to children about this. And so I really believe that it is a and a family responsibility, but also a privilege. And I think need to maybe think a little bit about it is your responsibility as a parent to teach your children about sexuality. And I want to be very clear here that we should not be talking to children only about negative sexuality, which is the thing we tend to do. We say to kids, if anybody tries to touch your private part, come and tell mommy. So that education we tend to give children from a young age, but we seldom talk to children about positive sexuality from a young age. And again, we need to think about, what do I want my child's experience to be of sexuality? I want my child to have a positive experience of sexuality. It shouldn't be something shameful, dirty, or ugly. So again, do we only talk about the negative bits, or do we talk about, you know, all of it? So not only is it our responsibility, but I really believe it is a privilege. It is such an important part of our children's education. I would rather that my child knows that they can come and talk to me about anything and everything and ask me anything they need to know, and feel comfortable with that, than to not know where to go, which then means that they end up going to maybe older peers or cousins or onto the internet, and where they tend to get misinformation, number one. And number two, the other thing that happens is that they become vulnerable to situations of abuse and online grooming, etc. So we really need to think about this as an opportunity to create safety for our children, to create an opportunity where children are not so vulnerable, and that I want to be the go-to person when my children has questions about this. That really is a privilege as a parent, and as uncomfortable as what it might feel. And it's okay to say to kids, I'm not sure how to answer this. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this. Or, it's okay to say to kids, it's a topic my mom never discussed with me, so I'm not sure how to discuss it with you. But it is important enough, so even if I feel uncomfortable, it's okay. We're going to get through this together. And can you help me figure this out? Because that's the other thing. Kids love it when adults ask for their help. So if we're saying to kids, I don't quite know how to have this conversation, but, help me, we'll figure this out together. It's a good start.
Yes. And I've heard people being concerned about playground talk, because that's also where a lot of children get their information. And it's all from a different value system. And, they get it from older sisters or brothers, or then their friends on the playground. So parents are very hesitant on how much information to give at the different ages. So at what age do you think that parents should start talking with children about sexual issues or their sexuality?
So thank you for that. I think just as we teach children names for different body parts from a young age, we teach children names for their private parts from a young age. And, whether we use the correct professional adult sounding names, or whether we use little funny family names like Tokkertjie or, Bloemmetjie or whatever, as long as children have a name, I think that's the first place to start talking. I think the second place, and I'm talking preschool here, is when children notice somebody else's mommy being pregnant, or when children are mommy has a baby, or, these are such opportunities to begin basic conversations with children around your value system, around sexuality, and then also about the amazing process of making and having babies. So, it would be very simple with a little one to say, that the mommy and the daddy, who love each other very much and really wanted to have a baby, came together in a special hug, and that's how the little baby started to grow. That would be appropriate for a 3-year-old, for instance. But by the time a child is 5, we're not just talking about a special hug that's only for grown-ups. We're beginning to talk about penis and vagina, and, there's actual penetration, but in a way that's child-friendly. And I think this is the thing that's really hard for parents, is that they think their children are going to be freaked out by this conversation. And I can tell you, with all the preschoolers that I've had this conversation with, the sex part is really not the most fascinating part of the conversation for them. The part that's really exciting for them is to learn about how the baby grows in the mommy's tummy, and it can hear daddy's voice, and it hiccups, and, so I think we as adults have such kind of fears and misconceptions about how children are going to understand this, that by implication we then also put those fears onto our children, because as soon as these topics come up, we pretend like we didn't hear them, or we cover their eyes and say, don't look, or, so we are, by our non-verbal communication and by not engaging in the conversation, sending very clear messages. So in essence, though, I think what's important, by the time children go to grade 1, big school, whether it's grade R or grade 1, so depending on, whether there's older children in the school, children need to know the basics of sex. How does sex work? Penis, vagina, egg, sperm, all of that. Children need to have the basics of that. And again, for me, it's about children having information, because information is power, and that power then also enables them to be less vulnerable. So, but it's a tricky conversation to have with children, and I always suggest to parents to use visual aids. So, for instance, Jelly Beans has developed a little book. It's called Our Bodies, that is available on our website for free download. in 5 different languages, which is exactly aimed at the age group sort of grade R to grade 3 to help parents and teachers begin these conversations with children in a comfortable, I don't want to say matter of fact because it's serious information, but in a way that's not everybody freaking out and where do I begin this conversation? Obviously, some kids may have more questions, you know, and then you as an adult need to think about, first of all, where is this question coming from? Is it an appropriate question for my child of this age? If so, let me give some appropriate information back. If it's something that's kind of going, wow, you know, where would my child hear this information, or maybe something like that, you could say, well, where did you hear about this, or who told you, or, you know, so you could explore a little bit more with them to try and find out. And you may choose not to necessarily give the answer to the question immediately if you just want to figure out for yourself what would be the appropriate information. But I think what's important is that parents need to understand that when children are asking information, they've heard about it somewhere, or they, you know, there's a question and there needs to be some kind of answer. The detail of the answer you can, you know, navigate as a parent, but there needs to be an answer. And, you know, sometimes as parents, we don't quite know how to deal with things. And so we might go, oh, I don't know. And in fact, I've done it with my own children. But to go back afterwards and say, just, you know, you really caught me off guard. I wasn't sure how to answer this. And, you know, but this is what I think I'd like to explain to you. So apologies for not being honest with you yesterday, but Mommy really wasn't sure what to say. But yes, so by the time children are going to grade 1, they really need to be in a space where they are have a good basic understanding of this and have a good basic understanding of who's my go-to person to ask questions. And of course, remember when children start going to big school, teachers become a very important part of this communication process. You know, sometimes teachers are much more knowledgeable, according to children, than their own parents when they're in grade 1. You know, so if teacher says this, then it really is so. So I think, again, you know, it's not just for parents, but, you know, our teachers of young children really also need to have the skills and the approach in terms of how we begin these very important conversations.
Yeah, you made me think of something very funny now. When we moved from the Platteland to Bloemfontein, and we were driving past one of the local hospitals where my daughter was born and her cousin was born, but at that time they were living in Tanzania, but my sister came down to give birth here, and she and all the friends from the Platteland, you know, they all had their babies in the same hospital. And we were driving past the hospital and my daughter said, Mommy, where do babies come from? And she was, I think she was about 5 years old. And I got this, you know, I was like really caught off guard. And I said, where do you think they come from, you know? And she said, I don't know. Do they all come from this hospital? You know, and that also made me realize that we don't always have to launch into an explanation. We can often just throw back the ball and say, what do you know? Or what have you heard? So that we can meet them where they are. Yeah, so what do you say?
But maybe if I could respond to that. Yes, the children were born at the hospital, but they weren't made at the hospital. The doctor just helped them come out of the mommy's tummy. So that's how we can really take that really cute moment, you know, and then start adding a little bit of information, which is appropriate. And I think one of the things that's important is to add layers of information. So if I give a basic little thread of information, the next time the conversation comes up, I can add another layer and another layer. The difficulty is if you say that you came from the cabbage patch, or I went and fetched you in the woods and, you know, shaved off your fur, at some point, and the child finds out the real information, the child has to decide, okay, so now who am I going to believe? My mom or my dad or the person who told me the information? So I always encourage parents, I call them teachable moments. There are so many teachable moments when you are open to it, where you can be giving nuggets of information to children. It doesn't have to be a formal, let's sit down and have the talk kind of conversation, because that's not how we teach children about anything. We have many little conversations, and at times, taking out a book and having a look at a book might be an appropriate more formal conversation. But there's so many other nuggets of information that if we are open to it, we can use as teachable moments with our children.
Yeah, and I think they often show us when they're ready by asking a certain question, and then we can really use that teachable moment. So, Edith, what is your feeling about the curriculum that they teach at school? Because obviously it's not the school's responsibility to establish a value system. They merely have to teach, what in life skills, what it is all about. And do you think a parent plays an important role there to support the school or support the teacher, supporting their child from a value point of view?
So I think there's lots of things I just want to answer all in one. The education department has put together a new sexuality education curriculum because we know that the majority of parents do not have these conversations with children, and these are exceptionally important child protection conversations for our children. And so that is where the education department is coming from, is saying our children need more information. However, to call it a sexuality education curriculum, I think maybe has put the spotlight very much on the sexuality aspect, and that is a part of it. But there is a lot of focus in the curriculum at looking at relationships, respect, consent, all of these things that make up relationships. Relationships are not sex, and sex is not relationships. And so maybe if they'd have called it, relationship curriculum, it may have been easier for parents to kind of digest a little bit. I think it is important as a parent to have a look at what is in your child's textbook, what is being discussed in the classroom, so that you can be having or picking up on some of those conversations, because like you rightly said, and so that the school cannot teach your children a value system. And that, again, is the privilege of being a parent, is that you need to be teaching the children your value system. Remember also that the school deals with, there's 40 children in a class, and they can't be dealing with all of the questions or concerns that each of the children have. And so again, this offers an opportunity for your child to be asking, what can I don't understand. They made a joke in class the other day and I didn't understand what they were referring to. Now, some of the parents in any sexuality education with their children and might be coming up to sort of grade 5, 6, 7 and open their children's life orientation books might be rather alarmed at what they see. They might be going, oh my goodness, this is not sort of what I thought my kids should know at this point in time. If I can really just say to the parents, that information in those textbooks is probably the minimum of what your children know. Your children know a whole lot more than you think that they know. I know that most parents work really hard to protect their children from inappropriate information. If I think about the internet and pornography, but once children go outside of your home, you can no longer be the guardian of information that your children receive. You have to become the guidance. You have to be able to help your children guide and navigate. To say to kids you can't look at the internet is ridiculous. To say to your kids you can't look at pornography. What happens if there's a click that comes up and the child by accident clicks on it and it takes them into some kind of a pornography site? It doesn't help to say to kids, you can't do that. As a guidance, we need to be teaching children what could you do in that situation. So your friend comes to show you something on their phone that you don't want to have a look at. It's okay for you to say, I don't want to have a look, dude, and turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
To pretend like that's not going to happen to your children, then you are really living in rainbow lands where the unicorns live. Our children are exposed to enormous amounts of sexual information. And also, many parents don't want to hear this, our children are seeking out a lot of sexual information. We have probably about 1 out of every 10 children aged 10 in Gauteng, if I remember that stats correctly, who are actively watching pornography every single day. 1 out of every 10-year-olds. So
wow.
Our children are going there, they're looking for information. If you go into Google Images and you type in a 3-letter word, sex, have a look at what that brings up on Google Images. A really innocent word that a 5-year-old could type into a computer. Have a look at the images that come up there. So to imagine that your child is shielded and protected because you have, created the shield in your home is unfortunately unrealistic, because your shield and your kind of protective force only works in certain environments, and children are exposed to really graphic, really abusive, really inappropriate information, and many of them don't even yet have the basic information, and are getting exposed to all sorts of information. If I think of some of the teenagers that I work with, the angst that they have around issues around sexual orientation and pronouns and, am I bisexual or heterosexual, or am I pansexual, or, all of these, they are just flooded with all of these, this information. And, our children are just, they need a space where they can process some of this. You don't have to have all the answers
right.
when you're 13.
Also, yes. And parents have a false sense of peace when they think that they've got parental control on their children's phones. Because
Yes.
somewhere at school, on the playground, you will find somebody who does not have that parental control, and you will just get, whatever you are looking for on the friend's phone or at the friend's sleepover,
And let's be honest, our kids know much more about technology than what we probably do. You might have a password lock on your phone, but your child is standing there watching where your fingers go. Literally, a child explained this to me. She said, I sort of watched how my mom's fingers moved across the keyboard when she was unlocking her phone. And then I took the phone and I held it in the sunlight so I could see where the smudges of her fingerprints were on the phone. And then I could unlock my mom's phone. So does mom's phone have those parental controls on? What other information or videos does mom or dad's phone have? And, I think this is also the other thing, is that parents need to realize, to imagine that just having some kind of parental control device and that your child is safe. Again, it's not true. They are technologically very savvy. So make sure that what you have available is stuff, whatever's on your phone would be something that would be acceptable for your child to see.
Yeah, and also maybe to explain to them why that parental control is there, that it's not because you don't trust them, but it's because to protect them. And should something slip through, they can come to you with what they saw and what anxiety it has caused. because it causes a lot of anxiety for them to carry it on their own. You know, it becomes very heavy if there is no one they can speak to, out of fear of getting into trouble for seeing something.
Yeah. You know, so I think it's important that parents need to be open with children and say, you know, the internet is an amazing place, but there is a dark side to it. And so to protect you from kind of landing sometimes in a bit of a rabbit hole, because that's what happens is you by accident click on a little pop-up and then there's another one, and before children know it, they are watching hardcore porn. So to be saying to kids, look, we don't want you exposed to that aspect of the internet. So this is why we're having, you know, these various different parental controls put on. But at the same time, let's be honest. Kids want to know information, and Google has all the answers nowadays. You know, when we were kids, we wanted to know information about some of these things. So let's not just pretend that it's, you know, it's the dark side of the internet that's coming to get our children. Our children sometimes innocently, or maybe not so innocently, are going onto the internet and asking questions, which land them in difficult spaces. And so we need to say to kids, you know, this is a two-way street. We know sometimes you have questions. We know sometimes there's a dark side to the internet, and we want to protect you from all of that. And I think it's wise, if parents believe a child is old enough to have a cell phone, the responsibility of having a cell phone, that they should then enter into a contract with their children, which looks at the responsibilities that they as the child have in terms of having the privilege of having a cell phone. It's not a right to have a cell phone. It is a privilege. And just like mom needs to have a contract with Cell C or MTN, the child has a contract with the parent where they spell out the boundaries of the contract. Parents need to be able to have access to their children's phones. So I do not believe in having password protected phones where parents do not have the password. Parents should be allowed to check into their children's phones every now and again. And so I think, you know, these are things that we need to navigate with children, but hold children accountable in a similar way that Cell C would hold me accountable to pay my account at the end of the month.
Yeah, that's an amazing idea, to have that conversation about the freedom of a cell phone that comes with a lot of responsibilities. So, Edith, I think we could speak all day. It is such a relevant topic, and I think we have so many questions that we need answers to, and we will share all your resources with the parents who watch, because I would love them to download your free resources so that they are empowered enough to have this conversation, or the ongoing conversations with their children, and to realize that it's okay to not be comfortable with it, because we didn't grow up with comfortable conversations around it, and that we can just make it easier for our grandchildren to be in a more comfortable space one day.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining me and taking time from your busy schedule, and you are doing wonderful work. And I will post under this video, I will post all the resources and all the Jelly Beans' handle, so that we can spread all this wonderful knowledge and try and help parents navigate this difficult subject, because I think it's a matter of not having the skill that makes you not do it. And as soon as you realize, okay, but there are some resources and I can actually upskill, it gives you the power and the confidence to do it. So thank you so very much.
Maybe if I could just have a last say to parents, you know, we've been talking about the difficult part of having these conversations with your children. I think once we start kind of opening ourselves up a little bit, there are such fun moments that we can also have with your children. I can think of so many funny little things that children have shared with me, which, you know, is just precious. And that we shouldn't just see sexuality education as something big and scary, but something beautiful, because sexuality, positive sexuality, is that. It's beautiful, it's precious, it's love, it's relationship, it's so many things. So please, as parents, don't just think of sexuality education as this big monster that's, you know, scary. It's beautiful. You can really have such meaningful conversations with your children that they will treasure for the rest of their lives. And like you say, potentially pass on to your grandchildren. You know, and that's how we begin changing the culture of sexuality education, is to think not just about my child, but the future of where this information can potentially go. So thank you for that lovely comment. Lots of love to everyone, and I look forward to more conversations.
Yes, and please, if you have any questions, you can DM it to me or Edith, and we can take the conversation further sometimes in the future. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, and have a lovely weekend, Edith. And thank you to
Thank
all
you.
those who joined. It was really nice having you.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.